So what we have here is a gear shift on a CBR650, and as you can see, it is acting normally as it should be, where it requires a click to shift gears. However, if the bike is laid down, and in this case it really doesn't have much to prevent it from falling down on something like this, it could impact this, causing an issue. Now if you see that this is moving around freely, and it's okay to have a bit of a free play inside of this, but as you'll notice when I press this in, the gear shift is now sloppy. Let me show you again. As you'll notice, I will pull this, I'm actually going to lift it up at the same time. But I'm going to lift it up, and I'm going to pull it towards me and wiggle it around until it comes out. And now I am shifting gears once again. Why? Well, I'll show you in the next part. But let's try that again. So pretend my hand right here is my foot. And when we're shifting gears, we're going to downshift in the first. That's all nice. But there's a little mechanism on the other side that we'll see in a sec that prevents this from happening. Let's go see. So this is the other side of the motorcycle, and we can see that we have the clutch cover case, side case, whatever you want to call it. We're just going to take it off real quick. As you can see, it's going to only take me a handful of seconds to take this off because I've already done the disassembly process. So what I'm going to do is we're going to take this one screw out. We're going to gently remove the side case. Now there are points in which if this case was still on there properly, and properly meaning that there is a gasket maker along the rim, it would require a little bit of effort. But as we can see here, we've got a few things missing. We're missing a clutch basket and a few other components. But as we can see right here is our gear shift. Recall when I smacked it that this fell through and it became sloppy. As you'll see, I'm going to put it back on there. And I'm going to go to the other side and shift gears. You can probably see that happening, where this is moving around. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to push it back out so we can see what the problem is. It looks like it fell out, and that's okay. Because what's up here, and you'll notice a missing screw, is just a normal bolt that holds a piece of metal that prevents this from sliding left and right inside its housing. A very simple fix, but requires a bit of disassembly, and I promise that this disassembly is quite straightforward and easy as long as you follow instructions. But, and I'll show you in a second, that this little piece right here, if it's smacked out, unfortunately for me, it wasn't, it could crack. And what happens when it cracks is that it becomes, I believe, aluminum. And aluminum is very malleable, but also can be brittle once you bend it. And what happens is if you smack it hard enough, or if it hits something else, that piece is going to fall all the way down here and into the oil pan. We do not want any pieces flying around our very sensitive internal engine components, which can tear up teeth and can mess up other things. Now I'm going to go on the other side again, I'm going to push it back out, and I'm just going to flop it around so you can get an idea of what's happening. Now what I have here, which is covered up, and if you have parts sitting that are sensitive, is I recommend putting a paper towel over it. But these are all the internal components that I have removed to get the clutch basket off. And as we'll see here, I'll move this over. Give me one. That is the bolt I was referring to, and this is a metal piece that holds that gear shifter from sliding back and forth. As you can see, it's broken, and the only reason it's broken is because when I saw it, it was like this, with of course the bolt going through it, and it was bent. And I already had a paper towel down inside the oil pan to prevent this, if this had fallen when I was working on it, be catched inside the paper towel. So this, I just took my fingers, pried it off, took the bolt out, and I took this piece out. This is just a stake. This is, well, it has to be staked. This is a screw that's going to hold on the entire clutch basket assembly. But it does look very intimidating, and I assure you it's not that difficult. It is a bit intimidating at first because these are internal components of an engine. These are all the bolts that came out. As you can see, there's not too many. This just holds the side case on there. And I encourage you, if you are ever taking something apart, to label things, and label it in the way that you think about it. So what I mean by that, your top is going to be different from my kind of top. Your right is going to be a different kind of right than from mine. What that means is that you've got to make a plan in which you're going to take these things apart. This is the top bolt, this is the right bolt, and I know what this is for. This is for the bottom fairing. Your definition of these things may be different, especially when it comes to the bottom fairing, especially on your own motorcycle. You may have other things in here. This may be the bottom bolt, this may be the side bolt, whatever. But see, I've counted 1 through 14 the side case bolts. And if we go back over and we take a look at the side case that I've just taken off, we see there's a bunch of holes, and that's where of course the bolts are going to go through. But we want to make sure that these are going to go back in the same way they came out. Why this is important? Well, if we look at the bolts, they're actually all the same size and the same bolt, which is really great, because if you get them mixed up, it doesn't matter. You just put them back in and you make sure all the holes are filled. This isn't always the case. What will happen, especially if we're working on other vehicles, in the case of perhaps another motorcycle or a truck or a car, and this is where I've learned this, is when I took off the water pump on my F250, and the bolts are actually different lengths. Are they the same pitch in regard to how close the threads are together, how big the bolt is around? I believe they actually are the same, but the length of the bolt is important, because you don't want to put a bolt in that's going to go halfway in because it's too long and not hold the water pump on, or it's too short. But for this, it's actually pretty straightforward. You just take a hard case off, drop it off to the side, and you'll have everything in there that you'll need to see. Again, the way I learn best is I just keep talking about it. By now you probably understand what I'm talking about, but if you ever gone to school, received an education, or have anyone shown you how to do something, the first time they say it, it may not make sense. Second time they say it, makes a bit more sense. Third time they say it, they may include a new word or describe it differently that helps you understand it way much better. We understand that this piece is connected to the gear shaft. There are proper terms for these things. When you look at a schematics for each vehicle, it'll call it something different. We're just going to call it the gear shift rod. Gear shift rod is right there. This is just a plate. This is going to connect it to your transmission, and this is what shifts gears. This is the bolt that held in the piece of metal that I tore off myself to prevent it from falling in, and this is where I put the paper towel down here, because down there is actually all oil. And of course I'm not going to stick anything in there, but you see where the darkness is actually the oil sitting in the oil pan. Did I have to do an oil change for this? No. And the reason being is because of how this bike is designed. In the oil pan, if we come down here, we actually may not be able to see it because of the downpipes, but it's actually right here, and you can see the difference between these two metals. The bottom half is actually the oil pan, and that's where all of our oil is going to sit. When you put the bike on its kickstand, the oil is going to be all the way down in the pan, and of course off to the left side of the vehicle. This is not the case for any vehicles you may work on in the future, such as a truck or a car, or even other motorcycles. I know this is just a fact for this CBR. So it makes it pretty easy to work on. You don't have to do any oil changes or fluid changes, whatever. This comes right off. This stuff is all, of course, coated with oil. So it makes working with this a little bit tricky, because you do not want to drop any parts, such as tiny things that you'll never find again down there. If you do drop something down in that oil pan, you may be able to fish it out. I don't know. I've been lucky that I haven't had to do that. But what happens is you'll have to split the case or take off the oil pan, find the part, and take it out. That's just the fun of working on engines, especially when everything's in a tight environment such as this in a small inline four. What we have here is my motorcycle, and this is actually an inline 3 900. Technically it has 848 cc's, and they felt it was okay to round it up to 900, probably because of marketing reasons. But I'm going to show you something that's really important. My bike is different. It's a Yamaha. The one behind us is a Honda, if you don't know. This is all going to come off separately. So if I were to do the same thing on my motorcycle, hopefully not, this side is going to come off, and you can see there's a different set of bolts going for this. I believe I would be able to do the same thing with this motorcycle, where I do not have to take out any oil, because as you can see here, here's our little oil window. When the bike is in operation, even when it's on its side stand, this is going to fill up. Oil pressure is building, oil pump is running, oil is being circulated throughout the engine. If we were to lean this motorcycle up, so it's facing as if you were sitting on it and riding down the road, this is going to fill up, oil is going to come up into here. It's only when you turn on the motorcycle that oil is being circulated throughout the engine. However, the most important point is understanding this concept of you do not need to drain the oil for this motorcycle and the one sitting behind me because of this. My oil pan is actually behind the headers here. It's an inline 3, so I have 3 headers coming through, connecting in one spot. Oil pan's all the way back here. And it's actually an irregular shaped oil pan. It's not a perfect square. It's actually going to be deeper on one side to accommodate my inline 3 exhaust ports. Exhaust ports, headers, whatever you want to call it. You understand what I'm trying to refer to. Let's go over to another motorcycle. This one is a dirt bike. This is a DRZ 400. Because it needs high clearance, oil is distributed differently in this motorcycle. As you can see, as I come down on the bottom, it's going to be hard to see because of poor lighting. There is no giant oil pan that sits. All the oil is always going to be inside the engine. And of course, when the engine turns on, oil is going to be running around, as it should be. If we were to do a similar job on the DRZ, we would have to remove the oil, and then we'll be able to take off the side case. Now it looks like this one's a bit more complex. Maybe not. This looks like it's one piece, and then the piece behind it is a bit different. But notice here we have looks like about an 8mm here, whereas on the other one we're going to need an Allen keys to remove those parts. The main point I want to convey with this is that it's not going to be as hard as you think. Now I'm going to drop something in a second, of course. It looks complex, it looks scary, and yeah, I was a bit paranoid when working on it. But as long as you follow the instructions, you're careful, and you are constantly reading up on instructions, you should be fine. What I've also done, and if you benefit from having a vehicle that's either A, everyone owns, or 2, is recently built from like the year 2000 and onwards, you'll have a lot of people making YouTube videos, such as myself, demonstrating this so that other people like you can work on things and save. Well, here in California it's $189 an hour because, one, we have a lovely here Honda, and this Honda requires a Honda certified technician to work on it, which is why it costs $189 an hour. If I were to bring in my Yamaha over there on the other side, it'd be about 100 or 120. I don't know. Inflation's changed that number quite a lot. But I feel it's going to be important for people to understand these sort of things, especially coming in the future when work becomes more expensive, and especially for, well, really easy, dumb, shitty things like this. Now you're probably thinking, how many tools did it take for me to get this thing off? You'll be surprised how little it took. I forget the number, but it required an Allen key head, and this was for a 1/4 inch ratchet. And of course I have a few tools that I've accumulated over the last couple months to help me with these sort of things. You need of course your Phillips head, and these are all pretty much the same. If you have a good bike, if the engineers were good with the design, it won't require too many different tools. They probably won't switch up sizes on you unless you have a vehicle from 1990. But we'll go through it. Here's my 1/4 inch is not there. I did use my 3/8, trusty 3/8 with an adapter, of course. I have a 10mm socket sitting back there that I use for some other things. And of course in here we used this one over here. If I just pull it out, it's actually not on there. It's currently on this here. We'll get that into focus so you can actually see, and into some light. If I wasn't so stupid, I think it'd be better if I just told you. So again, we'll look at the engine while I look at this. It is a 5mm Allen head. And if we can look at that, we don't have the best technology. Goodness, my goodness. What we'll do is we'll put it here, and then we'll focus it. You can kind of get an idea of the shape. It's not a Torx head. Torx head are mainly used for wood screws and other things like that. We can actually see a Torx head right here. And we'll see a bit of a difference from this to this. This has more of a star shape, where this has more of a, I believe, a hexagon shape. And that's all it really took. Of course, it did require some fancy tools. I'm just going to cover this back up. 1/2 inch impact to get this off. Now this is staked, and you want to make sure that you get this unstaked. What staked means is that there's a bit of a rim on there, and it's going to be punched gently. We'll use a mechanics gently right in here. There's a little notch for it. Don't freak out. I freaked out when I saw this. This is designed to be there, so you can stake it in there. You don't have to unstake it. If you have an impact and you gently use it, you can get that bolt, or what we'll call this as an oversized nut, off. I'd recommend that you do actually take a sort of like a chisel or your least favorite flathead screwdriver and unstake it before taking it off. And if you're curious, you may be seeing in the instructions, is that in order to get this off, this is connected to our transmission, and if you're not in gear, say you're in neutral when I started it, this part right here is going to be spinning around, and this is the part you need to get off because this part is here. Go ahead and put the bike into first gear and let this do all the work. This is another tool I have. This helps a lot with getting this stuff off. To torque it off, you can use this. This is designed for you to, what you'll do, you have your bit on, you have this up on here. These are still in the case. We'll pretend that they're there. Put this on there, turn it by hand, and then give it some power and it will come off. This is designed to just speed up the process. What you'll want to use is your hand ratchets. I prefer not to use power tools on sorts of things like this because you'll be able to feel if something is stripping or or something's about to jump off. If you're working on a normal bolt, it gives you a better sense of what you're doing. Now, this is a 30 millimeter. If you are working on a CBR650, I believe this is a 2018, this is a 30 millimeter. Unfortunately, the instructions that we have, which is a Haynes manual, they make it a bit of a little journey to find sizes. They'll tell you the torque, of course, but the size of it, might as well just try figuring it out. So this is a 30 millimeter. If you have other sockets, of course, or a wrench, you can also figure it on different ways. The way I figure it out is just putting different wrenches on it and figuring it out and doing conversion charts. But this is a 30 millimeter. Most importantly, when you're working on things are just going to, you can just pull it out with your hand. Not everything is secured by a bolt or anything like that because other things are securing it. This side you can just pull out. There's needle bearings in here, and you can just pull that right out. Not the needle bearing individually, but this is just something that looks like this inside here with needle bearings. Again, why I'm mentioning this is because it is important to make sure that little things like this don't end up inside the motor when you're taking it off. Looking at schematics and understanding before you take something off how many parts are going to be involved in the process of when you take it off. Things are going to fall off. That's okay, as long as you're ready to catch it and understand that it's there. Some of these plates, especially on the back side here, you probably didn't notice, and I apologize for the light, but you didn't see that. I knew it was there because I looked at the instructions, and I looked at it, what we'll want to say is called an exploded view schematics of what you're about to do. In this case it's removing the clutch. Another thing you'll want to do, and we'll just pan around, is that when you are going to take things off, think about it. What does this part do? Why is it important? And you'll learn more about the engine. But most importantly, take pictures. I always have my cell phone on me and I take pictures of the process and I point at things. And the reason I point at things is because when I'm about to take something off that has a certain orientation or position, or something that isn't going to be easily figured out when I put it back together, I'll take a picture with my finger pointing at it, and I'll take a picture of me pointing at the same area with whatever I just took off to indicate what was there before I put my hands inside the motor. This saved me when I did my F250. Now I have an F250 that you can actually still work on without a degree in engineering. It's a 92. I did the water pump. Everything was pretty straightforward, but again, this is back to the bolt size. We want to make sure that the bolts are all the same size, and I took pictures and I lined them up on a piece of cardboard, just like this. So what we're going to do now is we're going to put the case back on, and I'll demonstrate a bit of the process. I don't think I'll make a separate video on this because it is quite a hands-on activity. Requires both hands, and well, sometimes things don't go the way we think. And we do say a lot of bad things that we don't intend to say. A lot of bad words, cuss words, whatever. Or even cursing at engineers. Sometimes they're not always at fault. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to put the side case back on, which is below us right now. And I'm going to go get the tool for it. Of course, we're going to use a 1/4 inch extension, 1/4 inch 5mm Allen key. These are also called hex keys. Hex keys, Allen keys, they mean the same thing. We're just going to find that bolt real quick. We're going to gently do this. You see that my oil stick is coming out. I forgot to mention that there are studs that you may be able to remove that are here, here, and I believe some are down here. That just helps you line things up. You can put this on with the oil stick in, just requires a little bit more thought. Of course, wipe your hands on your pants. And this bolt is going to go up here. This is my number 1, and the reason why it's my number 1 is because the clutch cable is going to hook on there. And I move in a counter, I'm sorry, not a counter, but a normal clockwise numbering, and you may have seen that on the notes there. Straightforward process, you know, you just put the bolt in there. And for now, since I'm not putting it on, I just put it on there loose enough. This is preventing dust and dirt and some idiot coming by and doing something. What you're going to do is that when you take this case off, you're going to clean the rim. There was a rim that's going to meet this, the main surface. Clean it off with a razor blade, gently making sure the old gasket sealer that you're taking off is not going back into the engine case or the side case that you're scraping it off. Clean it with acetone. let it dry, make sure the surface is ready, because what you're going to put on is a gasket sealer. This isn't going to be a normal gasket, which is what you may think of as it's going to be the same shape as the rim with hole cutouts for the bolts. Some engines do that, most engines actually do, but for something like this, Honda recommends a gasket sealer. I don't know if they make a gasket seal for this size or engine. What you'll do is you'll just put that along the rim, and you're going to be very precise about this, because this is where things start to matter. You'll have the case the way I just had it. You'll put it on. It's important that you do not, now I'm referring to my one of my other jobs here, is that you don't move it around. Thankfully we have studs that help us line up the shot. But you'll put this on, and what you want to make sure is it's not squeezing out the sides. If it's squeezing out here, it's probably squeezing out inside the motor, and we don't want gasket sealer inside the motor. Which is why you'll be very precise about how you put it on. You have to move fast, and you want to be careful. You just want to put a thin bead around the edge of the case, not the engine, but the case, because you're going to put this on, push it on gently, and let the bolts do the work. And you're going to work in a crisscross fashion. So if you put this one in, put this one in. If you put this one in, put this one in. So on, so forth. Hand tight. You don't need to torque it down right now. You just need to hand tighten it so it's squeezing on there. And then you're going to get a torque wrench. I have 3 different torque wrenches. Small ones for like fairings, a second one for minor, smaller things like this, and I have really big torque wrenches for, say, our wheels and the 30mm nut that went on here. I don't know the torque spec for that, but I know it's going to be quite a bit. I have a larger torque wrench for that. But for now, you just hand tighten it, get everything in, and then you're going to do the same thing, but now you're going to torque it to spec. Torque it to spec means you're going to put your torque wrench to the specification that is required for these bolts, either in foot-pounds or in Newton-meters. I prefer to do foot-pounds because my torque wrench is biased towards American standards, so it's going to be in foot-pounds. Since this is a Japanese motorcycle, it'll be in Newton-meters, and all you have to do is go on Google and do a conversion of, say, 80 Newton-meters to foot-pounds, and it'll give you the foot-pounds equivalent to 80 Newton-meters. Our other torque wrenches are biased towards the metric system, which will be in Newton-meters. But you do the same thing, and that's going to be a crisscross fashion from this bolt to this bolt. It doesn't matter which one you start on, just go bolt, 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 bolt. See how I move in a crisscross pattern? That's the most important part. And of course I left out some things in here. There's a temperature gauge that goes inside there. There's the clutch function that of course goes in there. But this was just a demonstration to show you what's going on. Hopefully you find that helpful. There's actually no other video that shows this on YouTube because I've done my own research and I just decided worst case is I have to take the bike to a machine shop, tech shop, whatever, to have them do it. So I just took off the plate, followed some instructions, got it off. You'll definitely save a lot of money doing it yourself. Most important thing is just to take your time, and no one's good at everything once right when they start. You're going to make a few mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes as long as you know how to fix them. But again, you torque it down. Of course, there's things missing, all that.